Have a good night, guys.
Thanks, Becky.
Hey, Steve.
Glenn, good to see you, man.
You too. You too. Congrats on the release of this book, man.
Well, and congrats on the release of your book.
Thank you.
Your book came out, I think, a month before mine, but we're both in that sweet season of book
Yeah.
release time. So,
Yes, sir. Steve, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone who's joining in tonight? I'm sure you're no stranger to them, but worth taking a few moments, maybe.
well, I'm Steve Macchia. I live in Greater Boston. I've been in ministry for over 4 decades. Started in pastoral ministry at Grace Chapel in Lexington. And then I went to a group called Vision New England, where I was there for 14 years. And then 19 years ago, I left Vision New England and we started fresh in this journey called Leadership Transformations. And the first door to open for us was Gordon Conwell, the seminary that I attended and graduated from and have 2 degrees from. And I was led to Christ by a graduate of that seminary. And so I felt like I was going back home in many ways. Started to lead the Pierce Center early on, which is a spiritual formation co-curricular experience for
Wow.
master's level students. And then LTI just began to be formulated, and we started doing all sorts of soul care, spiritual
Mm.
formation work with leaders and teams, and we've been doing that ever since. And we've got a team now. It started as a one-person outfit 19 years ago, and today we have 44 members of our team
Wow.
scattered all over the country. And
That's
you know some of
amazing.
those
I
wonderful
do.
people in your neck of the woods that are on our team. Rick Anderson in particular, our
Yes, sir. Shout
executive
out to
VP.
Rick.
Shout out to Rick, is right. So it's been fun. We train spiritual directors. We empower formational leaders.
Mm.
We come alongside young leaders at the seminary level, and
Mm.
it's just been great. Great experience.
Well, I've
So
been grateful for your work for a lot of years, Steve, and your writing and coaching. And yeah, I know Rick, and Rick has led a couple of workshops and seminars and training days for our pastoral team. So I'm Glenn Packiam. I've been at New Life Church in Colorado Springs for 22 years almost.
wow.
In the early years, I was one of the worship pastors and worked with the college ministry, started a school of worship there. And then kind of in the second decade, if you will, switched into a teaching pastoral role. We launched first a Sunday evening service that was kind of experimenting with historic contemplative practices, some might say liturgical practices. That's an okay word too. And then that launched into our first offsite congregation called New Life Downtown, which I have served as the lead pastor for the past 10 years.
Wow.
And it's been a wonderful thing. We don't do the video multi-site for us. We've been blessed with some great leaders, so our multi-congregational model tends to function a little bit like a parish system, where you have pastors contextualizing decisions and preaching live and all of that in their locations. And our downtown one, has again this sort of blend of charismatic spirituality and contemplative spirituality, which Steve, I think you and I, we both believe that there's quite an overlap in those worlds because of this the Holy Spirit at work. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about your book tonight too. So anyway, I've had the privilege of writing some over the years. Did my doctorate in theology that I finished a couple years ago from Durham University in the UK. I am a visiting fellow there, so go and teach a little bit. And then the recent project, The Resilient Pastor, was in partnership with Barna. I'm also a senior fellow at Barna, which means I get to have access to their research and collaborate with a very nice Steve, very nice, nicely. I'm waiting for my hard copy of your book. I've got the digital copy right here.
Ah,
So
okay.
yeah,
It's on its way. It's on
good.
its way.
I can't wait.
So this is Glenn's, the
Yeah,
Resilient
it's very
Pastor.
kind.
It's awesome. It's a substantive work.
Well, Steve, let's start with this question. Your book is called The Discerning Life, and
This is what this one looks like. Yeah.
there you go. Look at that.
There's,
I'm glad
there's,
you have it. I'm
yeah.
glad you have it.
I'm glad I have it too, man.
When just for people listening, you hear the word discernment, and a lot of times people think decision making, don't they?
They
But
do.
that's not what you're up to here. Tell us a bit about the book and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually upend the preconceived idea that discernment is all about decision making. It definitely includes decision making, but I really feel like the word discernment is meant for God. We're to
Mm,
discern God.
mm,
And so discerning God, noticing God. The
mm,
subtitle is an invitation to notice God in everything.
mm,
And that's really what I'm hoping for
mm,
and prayerful for, that this book will help individuals and groups get to the point where they say, let's are we noticing God? Are we seeing God?
mm,
Or is this just a total human endeavor or a human relationship? No, this is actually a relationship with the divine, and
mm,
He is initiating toward us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
mm.
I talk about tap 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 tap
Huh,
tap. That's a
huh,
concept in the book of paying attention to the tap
mm,
on the shoulder of our hearts, and God is initiating toward us because He loves us. He's a
mm,
lover. He's a giver. He's a
mm,
forgiver. He's
mm.
a redeemer, and He offers Himself to us all the time.
Yeah.
And are we flicking him off of the shoulder of our hearts, or are we numb to the
Mm,
tap? We just have
mm,
totally missed
mm,
completely,
mm,
or have we stiff-armed God
mm,
and said, "You stay at a distance. I'll see you when I want to see you,"
mm.
or are we more receptive
Yeah.
to the work of God, the delight of God,
Mm,
even things like creation, the obvious ways that we are to notice God. So I think
mm,
discernment begins with that desire to notice
mm,
and experience the fullness of
mm,
this relationship that we're invited into.
mm,
And it's a love affair, and he's infatuated with us.
mm.
What are we doing in return?
Yeah.
Are we noticing that or not?
Mm,
So I love the word discernment. I love spiritual discernment as a
mm,
concept, and
mm.
I really believe that the invitation is the discerning life. Let's live
Yes.
a discerning life. Um, so in the book, I use a phrase that comes from one of my mentors, Reuben Job,
Mm,
who I got to know him when he was a retired Methodist bishop before he
mm,
went on to glory.
mm,
And this guy was amazing. He did
mm,
all those wonderful guides to prayer, a guide to prayer for
mm,
ministers and other servants, a guide to prayer for all God's people,
wow.
those great upper room
Mm,
devotionals that take you through the church calendar. And
mm,
every week there were readings and reflection.
mm,
And
mm.
Reuben and his friend Norm Sawchuk did these compilations of these amazing readings
Wow.
and taught people basically through that example of how to notice God on a regular basis. And his concept was, if we pray through this material on our own,
Yes.
you and I get together a couple times a year and we're sharing our soul at a soul level. Imagine if we were like
Mm,
reading the same stuff and then coming
right.
together to share about that. That was kind of
Mm,
Reuben's
mm,
vision. And so he
mm.
compiled all these guides to prayer, and then he also compiled a guide to spiritual discernment.
Yeah.
And in that guide, and I've taken some of his material and put it into my appendix, um, because it's out of print and I love it. It's amazing
Mm,
material.
mm,
And so I got permission by Upper Room and by his widow, Beverly Job, to use it as one of my appendices. But the phrase that I'm getting to, long way to get there, is the phrase practicing a preference for God.
wow. Mm,
And he said that's in essence what spiritual discernment is learning how to practice
mm,
a preference
mm.
for God.
When you were talking about this idea of God as a lover, and it's such an important reminder, of who this God is, and that this isn't like, spiritual disciplines is such a difficult word or phrase, isn't it? Because it makes it sound like a chore. You got to brush your teeth, eat your vegetables, and pray. Um, and then, but there's also the downside of it sort of becoming you almost cordon it off, or segment your life, or like disciplines check,
Mm.
versus spiritual discernment or the discerning life. Well, that's everywhere. That's all the time. That's the prayer without ceasing kind of thing. And I was thinking about the when you talked about God as a lover, I think there's these they're not Christians, but they're well-known marriage therapists, the Gottmans, and they've done marriage therapy for years, and they talk about these bids for connection that happen in a marriage. And I remember reading an essay or an article or an excerpt from their book or something some years ago where they describe, the husband's reading the magazine or newspaper or whatever, and the wife's like, look at that red bird, and he goes, doesn't look up, or he says, oh, reads a headline out loud, and she doesn't, stop what she's doing. And what you miss in that moment, it's not about the bird or the headline or it's he calls them these bids for connection. There's a bid there to turn. And so what Gottman says is, couples, what you're supposed to do in a healthy relationship is, every time there's this bid for connection, you recognize it as a bid for connection, and then you turn toward. There's a turning toward instead of a turning away. And what I'm hearing you describe in the language of love here is the discerning life is not a discipline as in a chore, nor is it something you check the list and you're done, but it's a constant divine bid for connection that he's inviting us to turn toward each other, right?
It's so true. Yeah, my wife was a preschool teacher, and
Mm, mm,
she would
mm,
teach 3 and 4 year olds. She would say,
mm.
"I need to see your eyes. I need to see your eyes." So that when
Yeah,
the eyes come your way, then
yeah.
you have their attention.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
I see that in terms of my relationship with God, but also my relationship with the people around me, my family,
Mm,
my
mm,
colleagues, the people I'm spending
mm,
time with.
mm,
What's
mm.
happened to our eyes these days is they've been distracted.
Man.
That we're looking at our phones rather than each other's eyes. But it's when we give eye contact
Mm.
that we actually fall in love.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
been proven that those
Mm-hmm.
who spend time eye to eye
Mm.
actually grow in affection for another. It's when we
Wow.
can't tolerate that we're
Mm.
turning away from,
Mm.
that we don't want anything to do with.
Mm.
It's hard for enemies to
Mm.
lock eyes
Yes.
and stay enemies.
Yes.
It's usually that we're turning away and talking about,
Mm.
or not able to look eye to eye. And I
Mm.
think that the affection that God delights in is when we give him his attention,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
due to him, and
Yes.
not half-heartedly, but
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, talk for a moment about all the ways. And in the book, you introduce us to different ways of attentiveness and listening, and there's a relational element of it, communal. Um, I know that part of the challenge for us, and you alluded to our phones, and I want to quickly change the subject because that's too convicting, Steve. But 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 beyond the distraction that we all live with and our short attention spans and the dinging of our devices, what else is maybe one of the other hindrances is we just don't know. Oh, I could be paying attention to God in the midst of my relationships or community or nature or whatever, tease out, without giving away the content here, but tease out some of the ways that we can discern God.
Yeah, I do tease out some of or I spell out some of the distractions, that keep us from. And I do
Mm-hmm.
think that there are two key words for today. One is distraction, and the other
Mm.
one is narcissism. And
Mm.
I do feel that we are distracted by ourselves. So it's a
Yeah.
combination of both the distraction and the narcissism. We're very much a me-centric
Mm. Mm.
world today,
Mm. Mm.
and it's only getting worse. It's not really getting better. And I
Mm.
really feel that the radical call that it's on our lives is to say no to that,
Yeah.
and to say yes instead to a devotion to God, an attentiveness to God, and then a desire to be fully present with one another. So I
Mm.
talk about being with and for each other. So that it's one thing to be physically present, it's another thing to be actually in the corner with that person and for the sake of that other person.
Mm.
So I talk about the spiritual practices as well as the relational practices. So
Huh.
there are spiritual practices in our prayer closet,
mm,
that remind us of the importance of things like stillness
mm,
and the biblical text and a
mm,
life of prayer, mostly listening prayer rather than talking prayer. And then I talk about things like reflective practices like examine and these these ways of understanding the need to slow down and
mm.
to pay greater attention and greater focus, intentional focus on the lover of my soul.
Yeah.
And to not disregard that or to walk away from that, but instead
Yeah.
to prioritize that. And
Mm,
then to help each other communally
mm,
to notice God.
mm,
So, in the way in which I do that is I'm with you, I'm for you, I'm listening attentively. And I use the phrase pure listening.
mm,
I describe what pure listening is. And I know that
mm.
there's no such thing as like the purest of listening, but I'm trying to get my reader to understand that when you're listening to another, all you need to do is be present.
Mm,
Most of us don't want to be fixed
mm,
or corrected. We do want to be listened to. And when we're listened to at a soul level, we're actually expressing a tangible, in your face presentation of what God is doing for us. God's not distracted, God's
mm,
very focused on us. And
mm,
we need to learn how to listen as purely as possible.
mm,
So I talk about the spiritual attentiveness, but also the relational. And then I get into things like context and culture and what has formed us and made us who we are, and how can we come alongside each other to help each other fulfill the mission that God has for us. So at the at like chapter 8, I finally get to a discernment process
mm.
that helps teams sort of unpack that discerning life together. But it needs
That's
to come
amazing.
out. It needs to come out of that relational,
Yeah.
spiritual attentiveness, practicing a preference for God.
In so with my book, The Resilient Pastor, it's a pairing of insight and wisdom, and the insight part of it comes from some studies and data that Barna, I worked with their team to do. And one of the things we did, I outlined sort of 8 challenges facing the church today. 4 of those 8 are
Right.
specific to pastors, and then we kind of shaped these questions around those 8 challenges. And then I went on and did focus groups with pastors in the US, Canada, and the UK to kind of talk through how do they relate to the not only the challenges but to sort of what the statistics or the data was coming back about other pastors.
Right.
And Steve, I tell you, it's not surprising, but it's convicting, it's sobering. um, One of the things about pastors' relationship with God, or how our own spiritual life is being renewed, it's about half the pastors who say, yeah, I get time reading the Bible apart from sermon prep. And and I'm sympathetic to that. I have to preach every week, and I understand that. And then it's a much smaller percentage who say, yeah, actually, I build solitude into my life with God, or silence into my life with God. And there's some encouraging stories too. There's a guy in my focus group in Ireland, actually, and he says, once a month I go away for a day alone with God. And I thought, well, that's awesome. Um, but what are we missing when we don't make time for that?
I think we're missing affection
Mm, mm,
because
mm,
I think when we don't do that, and I've been working with pastors for 40 plus years, and I am a pastor and
mm,
understand pastoral challenges. I know how easy it is to get into the functional.
mm,
I need to be in the Word because I've got a message to
mhm, mhm,
convey, and it
mm,
can become a functional relationship. And over time, we
mm,
kind of grow dry and dusty
mm,
instead of warm and affectionate.
mm,
And I think that's the warmth and affection is, as I'm the old guy here, I long for more of that because
mm.
the functionality of ministry is just loaded with to-do lists
Yeah, yeah.
and fast-paced get ready for the next thing immediately, and you're going to be on, and you're going to be
Mm,
ready to pray and to preach
mm.
and to be present, and that's a lot of
I agree,
stress.
man. I
And,
agree.
I was just with a group yesterday of
Mm,
pastoral leaders and trying to
mm,
give them a day of quiet and
mm.
solitude and reflection. And it's a grind. I we bring a basket and we say, "You want to put your phone here for the day?" And it's like, "Oh no, I may need it," or I may. It's like,
Someone might need something from me. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And I've heard all the excuses,
Oh,
every single
sure.
excuse I've heard as to why you can't let that thing go. And the most recent and most um, you know popular is
Yeah.
my Bible is on there. And
Yeah.
I need to have my Bible. And I'm like,
Right.
what happened to the good old fashioned Bibles that no longer exist? And I'm fine with it for certain purposes,
Sure.
but I'm not fine with it in my prayer closet because it's loaded with too many distractions.
It's all
Uh,
too easy, man. All too easy. Jeez. Mm.
so you talk about a day of quiet, and it's just like they're going into spasms because they don't know how to do that. And Glenn, I think that is the nub of the problem
Yeah.
with the church today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything else leads to superficiality. I'm sorry. It
Mm-hmm.
just does.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't know what it means to struggle to
Mm-hmm.
pray and to struggle to, as Nowen would say, the biggest and most important discipline is to create space.
Mm-hmm.
I've become
Mm-hmm.
convinced that is the number one spiritual discipline,
Yes.
is to
Yes.
create unhindered, uncluttered, unhurried space.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us, 99% of us, I would say, I don't know what Barna says, but I would say 99
Well,
of the people I know, the
yeah.
people, when they're honest,
Yeah.
when they're transparent, they're like, I just never do this. I just
Yeah.
simply never do this. And when I get into a space like this, it takes me half the day to quiet all the voices,
Yeah.
all the trash talk that's going on
Yeah.
inside of my head that I need to somehow get rid of.
Well,
So it's huge.
people,
It's huge.
it is huge. It is huge. People have asked, as I've been talking about the book in the last, month or so. So, what is resilience? And sometimes that's motivated because the maybe the red light, kind of the flashing alarm stat was, and this isn't even in the book. This came out after I was mostly done with the manuscript, but January of 2021, 29% of pastors seriously considered quitting. October, it was 38%. So
Right. Right.
so people say, oh, we need resilience after this, the pandemic, the crises, the political tensions, racial upheaval. And it's as if the answer is, what's the technique?
Right.
And honestly, when I think about resilience, Steve, I think about this story that the late former chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth, Jonathan Sacks, um, uh, he told about going to his doctor for a physical, and we can probably relate to these example or this example, but he went in for his first. Doctor's got the sensors on him or whatever, puts him on the treadmill, and he says, start running, Rabbi. And he goes, well, what are you measuring? You measuring how fast I can run? He goes, no. And he goes, oh, you're measuring how far I can run? No. And the whole thing is over. He's got incline is up, the speed is up, all this stuff. And when it's over, he says, what were you testing? He said, I'm testing how quickly you recover and recalibrate after experiencing stress. And I think maybe even for younger leaders, we think, oh, the gauge of my health, or the gauge of the state of my soul is how fast I can work for God, or how far I can run, how long I can instead of saying, actually, the gauge is when you experience turbulence, and we all will in life, in ministry. You'll get, there might be a doctor's report, there might be a church upheaval, there might be an elder meeting. It's not that you don't experience upheaval. It's how quickly do you recalibrate and recover. And the story that I think of, Steve, in the Gospels is Peter in John 21, when he's been through the ultimate turbulence of his own sort of denial of Jesus, and now he sees the risen Jesus, but he's like, are we cool? What's going on here? Maybe he's gone back to fishing. And And Jesus doesn't recalibrate things for Peter by saying, now, come on, Peter, do you love the church? He doesn't say, come on, Peter, do you love the kingdom? He doesn't, charismatic that I am. He doesn't say, Peter, do you believe in a move of God? Because you're going to do some miracles in the next book here, Acts. It's none of that. It's Peter, do you love me? And so I love that you said, when I asked you, what are we missing? And you said, we're missing affection. I love that you said that, because truly, we're not missing effectiveness. We're not missing some sort of trick or technique to succeed in ministry. We're missing the affection of Christ Himself.
We are. It's a desert,
Mm,
and we're missing affection even for each other.
mm, mm,
When you think of the ways in which we have splintered in the past 2 years, and the division in the church today over
mm.
vax, no vax, mask, no
Right,
mask,
right.
red or blue or whatever. And it's like,
Mhm,
we don't know what it's like to actually
mm,
still look each other in the eye and say, I love you, no matter
mm,
what. No
mm,
matter what.
mm, mhm,
I was with a team recently, a leadership team, and I was walking through some of these principles of discernment, and I was saying, this principle in particular you need to pay attention to, and it's dying to your preconceived ideas of what needs to happen, like letting go, like humbly saying, I could be wrong here.
mm, mm.
And the pushback that I get is just like, oh my gosh, it's like you're suggesting that we let go of truth and we let go.
Yeah,
Like,
right,
I'm
right.
like, no, I'm saying let go of yourself.
Hmm,
It's,
hmm,
what does it mean to die to yourself? What does it mean to die to your best idea? What
mm,
does it actually mean to love another unconditionally?
mm,
That's what we've lost. We've lost the ability to love. We've lost
mm,
the ability to have mercy
mm,
and meekness
mm.
and kindness
Yeah,
and grace.
yeah.
And to me, that is only found when I'm willing to waste what was previously a productive hour
Mm,
and instead be present with God for that hour.
mm.
I feel like part of what the LTI team says about ourselves is we go across the country helping people learn how to do nothing really well,
That's great, Steve.
because we no one teaches that, no one encourages that, because we
Yeah.
are we are Protestant work ethic addicted,
Oh, it's driven, driven, driven. Yeah.
driven,
Mhm.
driven, driven, and we use words that
Mm,
I don't see in the Bible,
mm,
like success,
mm,
I, or competition.
mm.
Words that I'd love to just expunge them from our vocabulary.
Seriously. Yeah,
And
seriously.
I think all of this kind of pulls away from the affection that I'm describing. And
Mm,
you're in your four challenges to pastors are the challenge of vocation. What are we called to do? The challenge of spirituality. How
mm,
do we renew our relationship with God? The
mm,
challenge of relationships. How do we
mhm,
cultivate meaningful relationships? And then you say the challenge of credibility. How do we regain
mm,
credibility and trust?
mm,
I mean, those are very important questions. We must ask the
mm,
questions that you're raising
mm,
here in this
mm,
book,
mm.
because resiliency doesn't happen by human willpower.
No,
I can't choose to be resilient. I
no.
can I can pray that God would give me the grace to
Yes.
be resilient,
Yes.
but I can't muster that
No.
strength up. Otherwise, if I try to do that, you're going to outwit me and outstrength me and out. It's just I can't do it.
No.
I can't do it.
No,
So,
yeah.
how do we teach this to the very people that want to be strong
Mm.
and powerful and effective and mastering the divinity? It's like it's
Mastering yeah, MDivs. There you go. Steve, that's exactly right. And I say repeatedly, and I say it in the book, resilience, it's a work of grace. It's something that God does in us. But it's a byproduct of us reorienting our hearts or allowing Him to reorient us. If we use this sort of the framework of God, the divine lover who's drawing us to himself. It's allowing us to be turned, that
Right.
bid for
Right.
connection thing, the turn toward,
Right.
allowing us to be turned toward him. And then these things work, and we get grounded in the hope of the resurrection. We get surrounded by the right relationships around us. I mean, I think for so many of us, it's counterintuitive to say, actually, this is where you begin. You begin by not trying to fix, but by returning to this place of sitting. Even the challenge of credibility. I had a piece that went live this week, and will be there next week, for CT pastors, about this declining credibility. And there's some sort of concerning numbers of like, wow, non-Christians don't consider pastors a trustworthy source of wisdom. I mean, that's not a news flash, is it, Steve? And and even Christians, it's like basically a third of Christians on any said, yeah, I'm not sure if a pastor is a trustworthy source of wisdom, and can you blame them? But even something like that, we're tempted to kind of rush to say, well, let's fix that. How can we, go on a campaign and some sort of PR-ish kind of thing to fix this? And that's not it at all. I think even something like credibility is the result of good and right stewardship of power. And we don't get power right if we don't get our relationship right with Jesus.
So true.
Jesus called the disciples to himself, and then he sent them out. It says that in the Gospels, he called them to be with him and then to go out. And we like the going out, we like the healing the sick, driving out demons, all that stuff, but we don't like that actually the life source, the only way that is possible is because we've learned to be with him. And what happens, of course, when we're with him is we actually learn how he uses power. And he doesn't use power the way the world uses power. You talk about language like competition and right, that those are worldly frames of leadership and power. And I love, again, leadership transformation. What you guys are up to. You're not just transforming leaders, you're transforming how we think about what leadership even is.
Right. Yeah, kind of upending it,
Yeah.
because it needs to look different than the world. It needs to look
Yeah.
different than the business world in particular.
Yeah.
And I love all my businessmen and women
Oh,
friends, but their ideas need to be underneath the
yeah.
s- the the work of God, the
Yeah.
mandate of God, the biblical text that defines for us, what it means to actually empower another rather than power over another,
Mm, mm,
and to serve another rather than manipulate another.
mm,
So we,
mm,
we need to we need to be savvy today as
mm,
leaders
mm,
to even speak up against some of these concepts that actually are not good
mm,
spiritual formation or spiritual leadership forms to
mm,
use. I mean,
mm,
when there's an issue, are we always going to push harder to make it our way? Or I would suggest that the answer may be rest, wait, hold it more loosely.
mm,
And I think that goes
mm.
into, things like Sabbath. What's our view of Sabbath?
Yeah.
Somehow the fourth commandment has just been thrown away.
Mm,
Or we've ripped apart the creation story by pulling out the part that God rested and
mm,
separating it. No, that is a part of
mm,
the creation story. It,
mm.
it is the seventh
Love that.
day that he rested. And my big push these days is to get people to stop trying to figure out every question
Mm.
and instead learn how to rest and then to
Yeah.
trust, because that word trust is a big word. And if I'm closing my eyes and folding my hands and saying, Lord, I'm going to trust you,
Mm.
but then I open my eyes and I express myself and take over, am I really trusting God? No, I'm not trusting God when
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
taking over.
Mm.
So, I mean, I'm going to spend the day tomorrow with our
Mm.
seminary students talking about Sabbath rest.
Mm.
It's an important concept,
Mm.
but even pastors are throwing away Sabbath, and
Yeah.
I'll have whole groups of pastors on a retreat saying Sabbath is impossible. I'm like, Sabbath is impossible? How can Sabbath be impossible when if it's impossible to you, it'll never be possible for the
No.
people that you're serving, ever.
What? Yeah, and my heart goes out, Steve, because in the chapter on the challenge of vocation, I mean, part of the reason it's um, exhausting for pastors and is there's an impossible expectation that's placed on them. You know,
Right, right,
these women and men are sort of expected to be expert theologians, brilliant entrepreneurs, um, empathetic counselors, decisive commentators on social events, and it's just
that's exhausting.
it's exhausting. And maybe one of the most freeing things we can do as leaders or pastors and as believers in every sphere is to be able to confess our own limitations, to say, I'm so sorry, I can't actually do all those things, and let people down gently. But one of the other pieces of this, and this is maybe a little bit practical, but part of confessing our limitations is looking for that community around us. Like I can't do all those things, but maybe if we have the right team, or maybe if we have volunteers, or maybe if we understand that we're the body of Christ, and that to be a pastor is not to be the one-stop shop for everything
Right,
that the
right.
congregation needs, right?
Aren't we supposed to equip the saints
That's
for
it. That's it.
ministry?
That's it.
And then to give it away? I think we
Yeah.
claim too much as ours.
Mm, mm,
What are we willing to give away? What meaningful work are
mm,
we empowering others to go and fulfill?
mm.
And I would say for us as pastoral leadership types, we need to give it all away and only do what's absolutely necessary for us to do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're kind of an insecure bunch, we
Mm,
pastoral
mm,
types,
mm,
because we want to people please and we want to be needed and we want to be noticed and we want to make sure that we look right and sound smart and have read the right books. I remember a time when I was a pastor in a local church, and people would say, "Have you read X book?" And here we are talking about books, and I would say, "No, but I have it." And so at least if I had the book, I would feel better about myself. But my shelves, I have thousands of books. Have I
mm.
read them all? No. But did I buy them because someone said, yes, I did. I will admit I did that.
which
So
which which we want people to buy our
we want
books
to buy,
and
we want
read
them
them.
to
Yeah,
buy
and
ours
read
for
them. Yeah,
sure.
and read them. Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're in this trap,
Yeah, yeah.
and we believe all this stuff to be important and
Mm,
true when there's a deeper set of questions that need to be
mm,
addressed. There are some deeper issues that need to be
mm,
attended to. And I do think Sabbath is one of them.
mm,
I really do. I call Sabbath the turnkey to the deeper life.
mm,
No
mm.
Sabbath, no depth,
Yeah.
period.
Would it also be the turnkey to the discerning life? I mean, how connect those
Yeah.
for us? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's important to live a discerning life in with Sabbath as a practice and
Mm,
as a
mm,
lifestyle.
mm,
Because Sabbath is more than just a day of the week. It
mm,
becomes, those Selah moments, those
mm,
Sabbath moments throughout our day when we're willing to press the pause button
mm,
and, notice God. And, another question we could ask of pastors is how much time do they encourage others around them to just be silent together,
mm, mm,
together. So I like to encourage teams to consider tithing the time that they're meeting in silence. So imagine you have a 60-minute meeting. How about the first 6 minutes that we sit quietly together? We're here together in the same room, but we're actually prayerfully asking the
mm,
Lord to declutter our hearts. And we're actually praying around the circle
mm,
for our brothers and sisters that I'm meeting with in that hour.
Man, Steve, that's uncomfortable, man. You're making me squirm over here. I can't imagine. I mean, maybe a minute, but 6 minutes. Woo!
I've seen it how it transforms
Yeah,
ministry life and relationships.
yeah.
We try to do as much of that at LTI as we possibly can. Every time we begin a meeting, whether it's one other person or
Mm,
multiple people, let's just sit quietly together. Let's be
mm,
together in the Lord.
mm,
Let's pray into our time, but silently. You know, we may start with a biblical text and
mm.
read a verse or a psalm or
Yeah.
a couple of verses, but let's enter into our space together
Mm,
more prayerfully, more
mm,
reflectively.
mm,
And I think that's a Sabbath moment.
mm,
And we need a lot more Sabbath, frankly.
mm.
And you know, think of it this way. You know, look at all the addictions that are in our world today.
Yeah.
What is an addiction? An addiction has something to do with an adrenaline rush.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what's the opposite of an adrenaline rush? Is rest.
Mm,
I'm convinced that we have a lot of addictive practices today
mm,
because we've never been taught how to rest.
mm.
We
Wow.
simply don't know how to rest,
Mm,
or to rest holistically,
yeah.
or rest, um, even productively rest.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, to
Fruitfully, maybe. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
slow down,
Yeah.
just slow down. And I do think pastors need to learn how to do this. I'm not sure if that rest is covered in the resilient pastor, but
Well, it is. It is. Silence and solitude shows up in there. But one of the things I was going to say is I have found, and part of the, so there's that insight piece from the data or the focus group sort of, but then the wisdom is what we're learning from church history or scripture. And I think part of the wisdom that actually comes through sociology is that sometimes there are our heart is like a muscle that can get worn down.
mm,
And I talk about some research done from sociologist out of UC Berkeley, I think it is, and she talked about people who are in public service type roles, and she specifically, her work was with flight attendants.
wow,
And there's a certain fatigue that happens when you have to be happy all the time and cheerful and positive answers, and sometimes you have to display the right emotion, sometimes you actually have to engage or feel the right emotion.
mm,
And I think about that for people in the public eye.
yeah, pastor,
And one, it's one of, on one level it's there in our relationship with each other, we got to treat people well and all that. But even sometimes think about how for pastors our piety or our devotion is on display. It's public. Our piety is public. So when I'm praying before a microphone and people have to watch us pray. And so there's a certain level in which we're always turning up the dial on our own devotional life with God, and
yeah,
that fatigues the muscle a little bit of the soul, of the heart. And so in the book, what I encourage and invite pastors into is to actually dig wells that are different than the wells that you're serving other people water from. So for
good,
me, in my context, we're at a church where, a lot of our worship is music and modern music. And there's different kinds of prayer that we're in. And we've learned to expand that with, liturgical practices and all that, as I mentioned. But even so, for me, oftentimes when I'm needing to restore my soul at home, I'll engage in a spiritual practice that is different from the one that I've been leading my church in. So it's the whole idea of digging new wells. It's the same water table, it's the same current of the Spirit, but I need to access it in a different mode. And sometimes, you've no doubt seen this. Sometimes people, when they don't do that, they end up overcorrecting, or maybe it becomes more dramatic than it needs to be. And they say, oh, the modern worship is just all bad. I'm going to be a Catholic now or whatever. And maybe that's a leading of the Spirit and that's the right move for them. But I sometimes wonder if we could just vary up our diet a little bit or dig different wells, and to sort of say, okay, to replenish my soul, it's not another kind of prayer meeting or worship music. Maybe it is silence. Maybe it is the stillness of being sitting in an old cathedral. I was traveling a few weeks ago to England and deliberately made it a point to sit in morning prayer
mm,
in this 1,000-year-old cathedral. Why? Because it's nothing like my mode of spirituality, my normal mode of engaging God. And so what you're talking about with Sabbath and silence and solitude, it's contra to the leading and inspiring and preaching and provoking in a good way, and I think for those who have a public life, especially a public life of leading others to God, all the more we need a quieter, deeper inner life with God.
I couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more. It's reminiscent of Gary Thomas's work on sacred pathways. You
Yeah.
know, there are 9 pathways, and
Mm,
they're all different. You know, whether it's you're a nature lover, or you're a liturgist, or
mm,
you're an
mm,
activist, or a
mm,
contemplative. You know,
mm.
there are different pathways to
Yeah.
God, and I
Yeah.
do agree with you. You know, dig a new well. Go a new,
Mm,
try
mm,
a new way. It'll actually, bring out something deeper, or more of you, more of the
mm,
true you. One of the
mm,
things I've done recently is in my journal, and I still have an old fashioned, like I handwrite in my journal, is I use colored pens.
mm,
It's just, I bring, so it's a different color for what I'm journaling or what I'm writing
mm,
out, or the
mm.
prayers or the biblical text or whatever. And because I want to remember that I'm a creative person. There's something that I want to let loose in my creativity. So even using a different color pen, whether it's purple or pink or orange or brown, or,
Mm.
it's just, it helps me. It helps me get in touch with that other side of me that doesn't always get activated in the day to day.
Yeah.
Because we're all
I
productive
love that.
machines.
I love that, Steve.
We're just trying to be super productive in our work.
That's good. That's
And
good.
we do some work with your dad. I love your dad. Your dad's one of my heroes.
Mine too, for sure.
Springs Rescue Mission. I
Mhm.
love what they do in their leadership. They say we're going to take care of the souls
Mm.
of our people, the
Yeah.
people that work on the front lines, the people who are working with the homeless people every single day. So we take them on retreat and we give them a day of spiritual refreshment and
Mm.
renewal, because otherwise they'll just keep working themselves to the bone,
That's it.
because that's what we do. That's what we Protestant work ethic people do. We just,
It's our default mode, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, be productive,
Mm.
work, 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 and then work again, and never stop. I
Mm.
think it's interesting that the day is 24 hours,
Mm.
and three nice, neat groups of 8. Why don't we sleep for 8, work for 8, and recreate for 8?
Hey, Steve, is that in the book, or are you just this extra
No,
bonus
it's
content
just
here? This is,
it's
yeah.
it's just a desire of
Hey, that's your
mine.
next book, 8 by 3. You know,
8 by 3.
the Steve Macchia way.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like it.
yeah, right. But imagine if we actually tried to do something like that, Glenn.
Mm. Mm.
Instead, what are we? We're like 16 and 2 and 5. So,
Right, right.
because we don't know when to stop working,
Yeah.
particularly we pastoral ministry types.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're workaholics. I'm a recovering workaholic.
Well,
I'll
and
admit it.
the trick with the ministry thing, Steve, is we sort of imagine, well, this is for God. It's the most important work. How could we stop?
Right.
Which is why it's always so shocking when we read in the Gospels that Jesus withdrew, to pray, or even you saying God stopping in the seventh day is part of the act of creation. I love the way you put that. It's not just an addendum to the story.
It's not a PS.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not. It is a part of the creation account.
Mm.
There's a question here on the Q&A that I'm noticing.
All right.
I hear a lot of Ignatian spirituality in what you're saying. Yes, that's true. Um, what other influences have shaped you and your work? Well, I'm a huge Benedict fan. Benedict is probably my number one hero and led to writing one of my books, Crafting a Rule of
Rule
Life.
of Life. It's a great book, Steve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. And Benedict was all about a way of life. But Benedict, because he was in Rome trying to study theology, and I love his story because in Rome in the year 500,
Mm.
he was distressed by the party spirit of his
Mm.
fellow seminarians. So
Mm.
he packed up his little dorm room and
Mm.
he walked 30 miles east to Subiaco and ended up in this naturally carved out cave in a mountain. He lived there for 3 years
Mm.
in utter silence
Mm.
and solitude. I
Mm.
mean, he had some monks above, above on the top of the hill that would put
Mm. Mm. Mm.
food into the hole in the top of his cave, and he did have townspeople coming and showing an interest in him. But I love the radical choice
That's incredibly
of
radical.
of walking away from the party spirit of the seminary of the day. Can you imagine in the year
Yeah.
500? And he didn't like the party spirit.
Right.
He didn't like his fellow students that weren't taking this thing seriously. I love that. So Benedict is a huge influence on. I love all the ancients. I love Francis and Clare and yeah.
Okay, so
I,
this is
I'm prone to the Italians. You're prone maybe to the English and
English.
British ones.
Well, I know a little bit of Cuthbert and Bede, and I do tell
Uh-huh.
Cuthbert's story in the book.
I did. I
But
remember that. Yeah.
I am okay. I want to test out a theory. This is totally off script, and we only have a few minutes left. But since there's not a whole lot of questions in the chat, I'm going to throw this. I'm going to test out a theory with you, Steve. Okay, and
Yeah.
I'm totally a novice when it comes to some of these Italian spiritualities or the medieval spiritualities, whatever. But in my mind, this is an oversimplification, but in my mind, the Benedictine spirituality is about it's stability. It's about a rootedness in community and this quiet, hidden life, but rooted in stability. The Franciscan spirituality is really, it prizes simplicity. Let's strip away attachments and distractions and and even simplicity in your schedule. Interruptions are God sending, coming to you. The Ignatian spirituality, because it is this sort of finding God in all things,
Right.
it seems to be a spirituality of activity, which may be, and he's careful, I think, to say activity for the glory of God, right? We're supposed to go, but go for the glory of God. First of all, what do you think about that? Secondly, is that why your book, in a way, is just the book for moderns? Because we're not going to be, overly Benedictine. There's some limits to how Benedictine we can be. Boy, we need to be more Franciscan in simplicity, but it pushes against it. But there's something here about this. Okay, but Steve, I'm living on the go. Is there a discernment or a way of finding God in all things on the go? I mean, what do you think about that?
I love your theory. I affirm it as well in terms of your
Okay.
view of Benedict and Francis. I would share, um, and your understanding as well. I think of Saint Ignatius is very clear too. What I love about Saint Ignatius is that here's this tough guy, who's out in the battlefield.
Right, soldier. Yeah.
Yeah, soldier gets hurt, has this leg issue that sounds absolutely incredible. He didn't like how the bone was protruding. So he says to his surgeon, no, you got to cut that off. You got to trim that down. What a fool. But it was the way to God because when he was recovering from that crazy surgery, because he didn't want to put his socks on and have a protruding
He was
bone.
a bit of a fashionista. I mean,
He was
he
a
was.
fashionista. He was a prideful man. But by being laid up for so long and reading about the saints and everything that he touched kind of sparked a nerve in him to the place where he wanted to practice this way of being holy. And so when you talk about discernment, he's the master of discernment
Yeah.
because what he's written, I'm not smart enough to understand what he wrote, frankly. I need summary. I need people to summarize
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
So here's my really dumbing down Ignatius on the decision makings and discernment piece. He basically says there are three ways that we make decisions. Number one is when it's obvious.
Mm.
There's a fire in the building. Hey, what are we going to do? We're going to get out. That's obvious. Then there's the time when we discern from options. And then third is when we have to wait. And the waiting is the hardest. That third one is the hardest. So I think it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant that when you think about living your life, there's sometimes it's just, hey, I'm going to bed, I'm going to brush my teeth. Get up, I'm going to have breakfast. Obvious, 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 obvious. We don't have to like interview the Holy Spirit. Should I brush my teeth? It's like you don't have to interview the Spirit about that. That's obvious, so go do it. The waiting is the hardest. That's the third one, and the middle one is the discerning options, and that's what my chapter 8 in my book is all about. But I waited until chapter 8 because I was really trying to put the emphasis on the syllable of relationship, relationship, and then we get into the place where we're making some decision.
That's
So,
brilliant.
so I do think you're spot on. I like your overview. I affirm it, and yeah,
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Steve approves. Steve, we're right up at this time here of the hour mark, and there's a few minutes left. I wonder if you would lead us in a bit of stillness and then a closing prayer.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. Let me just invite us to hold all the words that we have just spoken and received. And perhaps even notice a word or a phrase that has leapt into our heart. Perhaps that gift is something to say thank you to God for. Father, we thank you for this hour together. Thank you for my brother Glenn. Thank you for his book that has been recently released, The Resilient Pastor. Thank you for Barna and their amazing research arm, who they are, what they're learning, what they're listening to, what they're discovering about pastors, pastoral work, the life of the church, the needs in the body of Christ. Thank you for Baker Bookhouse, the books that they're producing, the various arms that are represented in that publishing house, the store in Grand Rapids that's hosting this gathering. And I thank you for Zondervan Reflective, and their willingness to take on my project, The Discerning Life. An invitation to notice God in everything. And thank you for this time that we've been able to share with these friends in the social media world that are listening in and are engaged in this conversation. Help us by your grace to remain faithful to you all the days of our lives, to put our trust and our hope in your hands. Lead us, O Lord. We are yours, and we are grateful. We pray all this in your strong name, loving Father, gracious Savior, empowering Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. What a delight, Steve. What a delight to spend this hour with you.
Yeah, it's been a real treat for me as well. So thank you for joining me, and thank you and congratulations on your latest book.
And same to you, Steve. Same to you. May the Lord use it to return our souls to him, return our hearts and affections to him, cause us to turn toward him. Amen.
Amen. Amen. God bless you.
Thanks to everyone for joining us, and look for more events from Baker Bookhouse in the future.
Yep. Thanks, Baker Bookhouse. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.